we've been hearing an awful lot these days, understandably, about tariffs and this, what seems to me kind of bonkers Trump tariff plan and the supposed deals that are now being cut, although they seem to be more like pretend or ghosts of deals than actual deals, like the one with the United Kingdom. And so we've talked about by we I mean the mass media have covered the effect on international relations and international economy and the U.S. economy overall, corporate well-being, and which corporations will be winners and losers, mostly losers, I think. But one aspect of this that I think has been seriously underreported is the effect of these tariffs on working people, whether it's working people in the United States or working people in other countries that may or may not be trade partners with us. So, what are your thoughts? Starting with the United States, I guess. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think this is a grotesque, discriminatory program, economic program, that victimizes working class people and does so in an obvious, direct way, leading me to be mostly upset that there isn't more of a recognition and therefore directed opposition to this. Let me explain. A tariff, as we have said in previous programs, is a tax. No one should be mystified by the name. But more importantly, it is a regressive tax. It makes no effort to tap into the ability of the payer of the tax to afford it. You know, in our income tax, as you go up the ladder, there's a higher and higher percentage of your income that gets taxed. We don't all pay the same percentage. But a sales tax, like the one that people do have to face when they shop in our stores, is regressive because it makes no such effort. It's the same percentage of the price of the item, whether you're David Rockefeller or you're David impoverished. It's grotesque. We shouldn't allow that. There were fights in the whole 19th century and into the early part of the 20th century, which is why the federal income tax is a progressive tax, by people who wanted that progressivity to become the basic principle of American taxation. But we have seen the whole 20th century be a systematic undoing. Look, the federal income tax now only brings in about half of the revenue of the federal government. Where is the other half? From the Social Security tax. And that's regressive again because it's the same percentage, whatever your income is. In fact, it's worse because it stops at a certain point so that the really rich, those who earn more than whatever the cutoff is now, I think around $160,000. So if you earn more than that, you don't pay your Social Security tax at all. And that's not only not progressive, it's not even regressive. It is whatever the opposite of all of that is. It's a vehicle to make things more unequal. So a tariff, by being like a sales tax, raising the price of whatever it is that the tariff applies to, hits everybody equally, even though their means for paying it are grossly unequal, more unequal today than at any time in American history over the last half century. So I'm really upset, if you like, about that. But here's another one that is never spoken about, or almost never. I'm going to use the example of the electric vehicle. As we have talked about, the best and the cheapest electric cars and trucks now come from China, and they come in particular from the BYD Corporation in China. All over the world, companies, competitors of the United States, are buying BYD cars and trucks. You see them on the road everywhere, except in the United States. Why? Well, we have a tariff. Mr. Trump, during his first presidency, put on a tariff of about 27.5%, and Mr. Biden raised that to 100%, which means if you want to buy a $30,000 BYD electric truck for your business, you would have to pay 30,000 to China to get the truck shipped, and then another 30,000, 100%, to Uncle Sam as the tariff on that truck. That means it would cost you $60,000. Well, no one in America is doing that because you can get an electric truck. It's not as good, but you can get one for 50,000, and you're not going to buy a $60,000 one if you can get a $50,000 one. Yeah, but now here comes the punchline. Every competitor of the United States in Asia, Africa, Europe, you name it, by the way, including China, can buy that car at $30,000. You have to buy the American car for 50,000. That's a very large difference. And it means that your competitor, having lower costs for the cars and trucks they buy than you do, will outcompete you, will be able to drop their price and still make more profit than you do because you are paying out all this money. Now multiply that by all the other items.
Let me just stop you for a second, if I may,
please,
to point out a couple other aspects of this, because we're supposed to understand that economies and ecologies are entireties. They're not just consisting of separate parts. So before we move on from the example of the electric car, if people in this country, be it corporations or individuals, can't buy the $30,000 Chinese electric car, they're not going to buy the $55,000 American-made electric car most of the time. And by the way, that 50,000 comes with a tax break from the American government to Elon Musk in most cases, not directly, but as a subsidy to encourage it. And they're going to buy another car for 38,000 that is not electric, creating and adding to fossil fuel pollution that disproportionately affects working communities and the working people in them. So,
good point. Yeah.
So here we are, and but I wanted to ask you. We fought, many of us, for a long time against the WTO agreements in 1999, against NAFTA, against successfully, as it turns out, against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Trump was savvy enough in 2016 to understand that was a touch point. I talked to Democrats, as nobody knows what that is, that free trade agreement. And then I'd go to Michigan and see yard signs, stop the TPP and working class homes. So here are the working people of America, on the one hand, getting screwed by so-called free trade deals. And now the opposite of free trade, you could say, is tariffs. I'm not sure that's accurate, but I think people might see it that way. And the working people are getting screwed again.
Yeah.
So how does that work exactly?
Yeah. I mean, I'm an economist. That's what I teach my students,
Yeah.
Don't get caught up. Let me do it this way. Many, many years ago, in the middle of the 19th century, Karl Marx, living in London, was invited by a labor union in London to give a talk. This happened periodically. They knew he was on their side. So he said, well, what would you like me to talk about? They said free trade. Why? Because the Tories and the Liberals were fighting in the British Parliament, as they always did for the whole century, for free trade or not, open it up or close it down, just like we're debating in this country basically now. And Karl Marx went there and gave an essay, ever since widely published, called On Free Trade. He did what he was asked. And here was his point, which is as valid today as when he said it. He said, this is not an issue for the working class of Britain. He said, don't be fooled. And then he explained. He said, here's how it works. roughly half of British industry can't compete anymore with the Europeans. It wants protection. It wants a tariff wall so it can produce its crappy output at a high price without being outcompeted, by the Europeans who will come in here with a better quality and a lower price. The other half of British industry is against that because it knows that if Britain does it, those other countries will retaliate,
Mm.
and they depend on exports from Britain to their customers in Europe. And he said the only issue is which one wins in the parliament. Who has, and it was very clear what he meant. Who has bribed, or if you like, donated to the number of politicians to win that struggle? And they all know that which way the politician will go will depend not only on the donations, crucial as that is, but also on whether there will be mass support or not among voters. So it becomes necessary for the one group to spend time persuading the population that voting with them is the right thing to do for the country as a whole, which is where he came in and said, don't be fooled. It isn't a matter of the country as a whole. The protectionist will tell you the country as a whole will benefit from protection, and the free traders will tell you that the country as a whole will benefit. It's bullshit. I didn't say it this,
Right.
but it's bullshit. This is a struggle about people who will, no matter who wins, screw the working class to make more money because that's what they all do, whichever wing of this crew you put into office. We should be building the labor movement, the unions, to fight capitalism, not to get caught up in the struggles among capitalists as it rises and falls with the patterns of world trade. Was brilliant. Was just brilliant.
It's a fascinating, new angle on it, orthogonal, as they say. Coming at a right angle. And I think really important. And at that time too, Britain had still had its empire, and therefore its captive markets. Why Gandhi did his salt march, right? Because they weren't allowed to manufacture refined salt in India. But it also occurs to me that, tariffs, I don't know about free trade, but tariffs could be used as a tool of global worker solidarity, theoretically, right? You could have a tariff that says no manufactured product can be imported into the United States unless the workers making it had at least a minimum wage of X and health coverage and environmental protection. You could do those sorts of things. Instead of, we've seen the opposite with free trade. We've seen trade agreements that create sort of kangaroo courts of high-priced corporate lawyers overruling the laws of member nations when they try to protect themselves environmentally or what have you, and so they restrict the use of certain products. I imagine, and tariffs in this case are being used as a blunt instrument against working people. I can't imagine any working people gaining from them anywhere. But I guess the question then is, then what is this all? I mean, I will be asking you to ascribe rationality to Trump's actions, which is a risky proposition. But is this all just a head fake to get working people to think, well, we got screwed by these trade deals, so now these tariffs are going to do it for us? Because I don't think it'll take very long before people start noticing that stuff's getting expensive.
Look, absolutely. I don't know if I'd call it a head fake, although it's an interesting image. It seems that he actually believes it. I don't know. It's a very strange policy to use. That's why it hasn't been used before. You're right, of course, since he always justifies it by a whining lament that the United States has been cheated by everybody. I mean, really, a kind of almost paranoid fakery. I'm sure he knows better, but you never know. This image of being cheated then allows him to punish the evil cheaters who have been cheating. Look, Americans do feel cheated, no question about it. And Mr. Trump is doing his ideological job redirecting the sense of cheating, not by saying your employers cheat you, because that would be a taboo, but that foreigners cheat you. That's the most, popular ploy of anybody who whines, the evil other. And you have to be sure that the evil other can't vote against you, so you make the evil other a foreigner who doesn't have the right to vote. So here we go. Everybody's bad. And here he is smiting them with the tariff. And then that would explain that he doesn't really know or care what the tariff's longer consequences might be, because he's getting really good short-term PR by being able to posture in front of the camera as the one punishing those who have cheated us all this time. And that also avoids having to deal with a very, very good point, which I've never heard from anyone but you just now, that you could actually have a tariff, which is a little bit what the ILO, the International Labor Organization, has been trying to do for a century, but never dared propose tariffs that I'm aware of. But to say it would be very much of a benefit to all workers if wherever working conditions were abhorrent, low wages, bad working conditions, unhealthy working, if those were deemed to be unacceptable, and we wouldn't let the products of such conditions in, you would force the producers there to keep their market to make the conditions better. And the side effect of that would make capitalists in rich countries much less likely to move there, because that's why they go, to take advantage of the conditions they can't do in the United States there. That So the workers in the advanced countries avoid losing runaway shops, and the people in the poor countries get a real leg up on the conditions they have. It's not good for capitalists, which is why we don't have it, but it would be good for the working class, which is why we don't have it.
Right, right. And that would be global solidarity, which is
Yes,
something I ponder
literal.
a lot. Now, there is one aspect of this that puzzles me a little bit, and I'll tell you what it is. It is the idea that, how do I put this exactly? That I suspect you, as I know I have been saying for a long time, that this country and the West in general has a systemic problem, not a problem of personalities, not a problem of Richard Nixon or George W. Bush versus Barack Obama and Michael Dukakis or whomever, that there is a structural political / economic system in place that is the problem. I still believe that, but I'm puzzling over how to reconcile that belief with the phenomenon of Donald Trump in this particular instance, especially, who doesn't really seem to be benefiting. I mean, maybe a few, but a great many of the, powerful people who govern this system, truly govern this system, they don't seem to be winning big time off of this. I have seen them force him to pull back a couple times. It has appeared anyway. But how does this fit into that structural analysis of the flaws in our system?
Well, let me say two things in response to what you've been saying. On the how it might fit in, I think it is the case, and has been, that a very large portion of the business class in this country is not all that enthusiastic about Mr. Trump. They are willing to give him a chance. They are willing particularly because he commands a fairly powerful mass base, and so he can't be quite as dismissed as they used to treat him, which is part of why he behaves the way he does. But if you have followed, for example, the American Chamber of Commerce, they don't agree with these tariffs. They don't want them. They are part of a very large portion that invested huge amounts of money in production in China, in India, in Brazil, on the premise that they would profit by producing where it's cheap and shipping it back into the United States without a tariff to impede the process. They don't want this. They want free trade. And they are telling him, take it easy, man. Take it easy. And he has to walk back half of what he's already done, in part because of that. So I don't know how long a leash he has from them, but it is not open ended. There is a leash and they're holding on. And I think we ought to keep your point in mind because we may see the signs of it sooner than we think. And the other point is, I wish your point, I want to go back to it. I think that's very valuable that a tariff system could be set up that was for the working class. This is a very, very smart idea. I wish it were in the mind of Sean Fain. I wish he had said, instead of the tariffs are good for my workers, he would have remembered that my workers means American, and that literally a few miles north of Detroit, there are lots of Canadian workers in his union who are
Right.
against all of this because they're going to be hurt. Playing workers in one country off against another, that's what we do in wars. We let them kill each other in the interest of whoever's in charge. But they shouldn't be done in peacetime, and we should have unions taking the lead and saying, hey, wait a minute, what about our concerns when it comes to a tariff? Where are they? What is being done to use the tariff in a way that helps the labor movement? It would underscore to the American people that the way it's being used may be good for corporations, but sure as hell is not what workers want. That point could be made if the unions could say what you said a few moments ago.
And it seems to me, and we may have to come back to this because we only have a couple minutes left, but it seems to me that when a Sean Fain says something like these tariffs are good for my workers, there was a cartoon character years ago that said, I would gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today, but this would be Tuesday in 2074 or something. The idea that these tariffs will lead to a reinvestment in the U.S. industrial sector and a rehiring of industrial workers seems to me to be far-fetched at best and long-term at the soonest. I don't know. Isn't that what Fain is talking about? And isn't it sort of pixie dust?
No, I'm afraid. I mean, I can't speak for Sean Fain, obviously, but I think at least the way an awful lot of people read his comment was a thank you to Trump, that he was expressing the fact that a protective wall. By the way, that was after Mr. Trump had said there would be a 25% tariff. He has since walked that back. So
Oh, okay.
I don't know
Mhm.
whether, you know, I'm not aware whether Sean Fain has issued a statement since then that I'm not aware of. But when he put the tariff on, one of the things Sean Fain was widely quoted was saying, you know, "No, thank you, because it's good for those workers who now work in factories here in the United States because they will live a little longer in those jobs because it'll be a little less likely that Americans will buy foreign cars." And I remember feeling bad about it, that he obviously knows that if that's true and the price of cars is higher than it would otherwise be, that that's very bad for all the rest of the working class that has to pay those higher, this is a very old situation.
And his workers have to buy cars too.
Yes, and his workers have to buy, and he knows that, and he didn't have to say it. He could say, while this may help my workers, I am very much concerned. That's all. He would have had to just acknowledge that this is not some unalloyed good thing that happened, which is the desperate effort that the government makes to make it look as though we are all winners from this, which is crap.
And I guess my final comment on this would be that, and again, I'm not picking on Sean Fain except as an example, but I don't even know that it's good for his workers. They assemble the parts with which they assemble American cars, depending on the make of the car, it could be anywhere from 20 to 70% imported. So if the parts of the cars are hit by the tariffs, the ultimate price of the car is presumably affected by the tariff, and the workers are affected by the outcome.
Yeah. The minute you look closely, here's my final comment. For the last 40 years before Trump, the religion of economics in this country went like this. Isn't globalization wonderful? Isn't it marvelous how our companies can go to China and produce, and look, the cost of my shirt at Walmart or at Marshall's or at any of the stores. Look, I can get a dress shirt for a mere $10. It should have cost me 50, blah, 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 blah. We were told there was an unambiguous, I quote you, win-win situation that our companies are going global. Now we live in a country which tells us it's a win-win situation if we do the opposite. Well, people ought to learn something. It's not a win-win. It wasn't then, and it isn't now. And we shouldn't be so gullible as to buy, that kind of crap when we've been through the obvious untruth that it represents.
Well, so if they keep telling us win-win, we need new referees.
That's right. And we got to spend win by starting with the letter L, which is for lose. Anyway.
Right. Well, Richard Wolff, economist and host of Economic Update, as always, thanks for your insights and an enjoyable conversation. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you, RJ, for having a program that has these kinds of conversations. It's more needed in the United States than at any point in either of our lifetimes.
And that's a long time. So thank you. We depend on your support here at the 0 Hour. So please give whatever you can at any of the links you see on your screen. Thanks so much.